Thank you. Good morning, and I would like to start with a bit of a harrowing but familiar story. You may recognize yourself or one of your coworkers or someone else you know in some of these characters, but the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So this is Kartik, and Kartik just joined your organization, and he's just finished his paperwork, his HR training, and he's finally got his direct deposit set up, and he's finally ready to jump into the details of the technology. And so he knows that there are some things he has to do in the course of software development, and he goes around and starts asking his coworkers questions about how to do those things. Fortunately for Kartik, like, everyone's very happy to help. As soon as he has a question, people are willing to help. They jump in, try and get him where he needs to go. Unfortunately, sometimes the answer to those questions is, I don't know, it used to be this thing, but now I think it's this thing. Sometimes it depends. Maybe it's one of these, give them both a try. Sometimes the answer is also, you need these 10 things. Some of them depend on others. And by the way, you need to make sure to run this one first before you run that thing over there. Otherwise, none of it's going to work. And so, through this, people are still helping Kartik every chance they can. Hey, Kartik, how's your onboarding going? And he's polite and friendly, and he's saying, like, I think I get it. I'm getting some stuff done. Everything's okay, I guess. I've been taking some notes, but these are Kartik's notes. And, even more sadly, Kartik is just one in the latest line of people who have fallen victim to our kind of cottage industry of scripts and ways of doing things, meaning that we're really challenged over time by how we're doing things. And so Martin Fowler writes about this phenomenon called the design stamina hypothesis. Anyone heard of this one? In short, it essentially says that a system over time pays to have good design in it if you hope for the cumulative functionality of that system to continue to be able to grow. So compared to a system with no design, that system that has design is more maintainable, more manageable, and more understandable, and can take on more capacity for functionality. And so we want to do this in the name of driving down cost and ultimately really to be spending time on higher order problems. So we have problems that we are uniquely capable of solving. They're the meat and potatoes of what our organizations do. And we want to be spending our time directly attacking those problems rather than down in the tedium and the commodified activities that really distract us from solving those bigger problems. So I work at ITHAKA, which is a nonprofit in the higher education and academic space, most known for the JSTOR research platform, but we engage in grant-funded research and digital preservation as well. And as a nonprofit, it's sort of core to us to make sure that we're engaging in things that are sustainable for us at all times. So keeping things efficient and driving down that cost is very important for us. And if you squint at our organization, it kind of looks like this. So we have an infrastructure team, a business systems team, a DevOps team, a platform team who kind of does shared tooling and SDKs. And they all support a number of product teams building things for external users. And this is kind of a neat box and hierarchy, but the reality of it is, of course, more like this. So we have many teams helping each other, serving each other. There's cycles in this graph for sure. And really the takeaway, though, is that they have these business domains. And these, again, are the things they're uniquely equipped for. They're running user tests about this. They're running A/B tests and experiments around these things. They spend day in and day out trying to solve these problems. But they have a lot of glue work that they also have to do to get there. And if you aren't familiar with the term, you probably do know some of the things that it involves: following service logs, looking up service IP addresses, configuring routing for your app, provisioning new infrastructure, any number of things, really. It's a laundry list. And so a challenge is that teams are focused on these business domains. They're not necessarily spending all day talking to each other, sharing knowledge, sharing how they've solved these problems. And so if you pick a task from that glue work, there are probably that many ways of doing that task. And this is where it really starts to break down. And one challenge is not just that teams aren't talking to each other, it's that even if they tried, the things they would try to talk to each other about are themselves kind of complex. tasks are often kind of an amalgamation of separate, distinct things that you need to know how to use, how to put together, and really it's kind of a death by 1,000 paper cuts. So if you look at any given task, even if it's duplicated across a bunch of teams, maybe it's not so bad. It's one little task. What's the harm? You can also look at an individual team and all the tasks that they have to do and say, I don't know, the team's doing okay. But when you look at the cardinality of those things with all the teams and all the tasks, you really start to feel this pain. And it's not just the teams and the tasks, but the number of tools that can solve all those problems that they're using today, and the number of times you've changed those tools, the number of times you've changed systems, the number of times you've changed platforms, and the number of times teams have traded in and out of the team. People have traded in and out of the team. So when there's a new hire, or someone moving within the organization, or someone just temporarily trying to help out for a couple weeks, this all adds up. So I was on paper cut number 793, I'll say, and we had just finished moving from something else to Kubernetes, and we had a task around asking questions about routing, and my coworker and I worked up a script that answered that question about routing in Kubernetes, and it was all working, and we committed that script to our dumping ground repo of scripts in the hopes that someone who needs to ask this question of routing would have a way to do that. I slept on that, and in the morning I said, boy, that is the 793rd time no one will use that script. And so I really started thinking about why are we doing it this way? Why are we investing time in even codifying some of these things if we know that nobody's going to come back around and use them or improve them? And really basically thinking about okay, we have a shell script today. How do I get to something better? And what is that thing even? So I sat with this, I think, for the next week or so, and I started to think about some principles that I really wanted to imbue on this. And I felt like what I wanted was something that someone could install with a single command, and once installed, be able to use it immediately. And when there were updates to that thing or changes to that thing, to be able to upgrade readily to get those changes. And maybe their experience is good enough that they think about other tasks that they do and want to put them in as well, so they contribute to that. And over time, they start to feel an actual impact to their productivity and their satisfaction and their developer experience. And maybe if that impact is good enough, they will advocate for other people to install and use and upgrade and contribute to the thing. So it starts building this kind of self-sustaining engine, right? And so with these kind of needs in my mind, I set out to tackle this problem. And firstly, on the point of installation, we wanted something that really you could install and would be available anywhere on your machine, like any good command line tool. Being a Python enthusiast, of course, and with a fairly mature Python ecosystem at our organization, chose to use the Python ecosystem we had to leverage and get something done quickly. And ultimately to have something that people would only need to know the command name for to get working with. So we chose the name ITHAKA. Anyone who works at ITHAKA would probably know that name. So the way we accomplished that was through publishing a Python package that could act as a command line tool. And we used pipex for installing that package on people's machines. We may soon move to UV. I haven't really gotten across the finish line on that, but I'm looking in that direction. And the key moving part here is that we use something defined in PEP 621, but has been around for some time, called console scripts, or in pyproject.toml, it's the project.scripts section. And there's one key value pair there. And the left-hand side of that is the command name that you want to end up with on your machine. The right-hand side is a dotted module path, followed by a colon, followed by a function in that module to execute. And so in our case, the ITHAKA command, when invoked, points to the main function in the main module found in the ITHAKA package that is installed. And so ostensibly, we have a way of getting software to people's machines. Now we need to think about what is the user experience that they get once they have that tool. And we thought about some principles here that really go generally into the space of user experience design. We wanted to support self-discoverability. So anyone who got their hands on this tool, we wanted to be able to introspect that tool, find out all the functionality available, find out how to use that functionality without necessarily needing to read documentation, go to their coworker and ask about it, have enough information self-contained to help them. And to teach the underlying commands that are happening under the hood when possible. So rather than abstracting what's happening under the hood from users, we actually wanted to surface that so that they could learn what's happening. And if needed, when the CLI doesn't do something exactly the way they need it to, they can have a chance to sort of diverge from the path slightly and eventually come back to the CLI, maybe contributing something they learned back to the code base, rather than ejecting fully from the ecosystem when it doesn't do exactly what they need. We also wanted to provide actionable feedback at pretty much every step. So again, there are preconditions that might need to be in place before something is run. Maybe when something runs, something fails. There are many ways things can go wrong. So we always want to give people a corrective action that they can take to get right back into the flow. So for example, if someone doesn't have an AWS connection and they need to run a command that revolves around AWS, we can say, you don't have an AWS connection. Here's a command that you could run to get one. And finally, not to reinvent the good tools that already exist. We aren't looking to replace the world with our command line interface, rather just to create a nexus for people to find and use these things. So integrating them where we can. So on the sort of concrete front, we needed to construct a CLI somehow. And we chose to use the Typer package, which is built on Click. And if you're not familiar with either of these, they're both packages revolving around constructing command line interfaces. And Typer really just adds the facet of using Python's type annotations for type safety around command options and arguments. And here's a very minimal working example of a Typer application. So you instantiate a Typer app, which houses your commands and subcommands. And this one has a single command called hello with a name argument that is a string with a default value of world. And when invoked, this hello command echoes hello, the provided name. And you get a lot of things for free with Typer out of the box. So if you run this command with the help option, which is provided by Typer out of the box, you get a usage statement. It pulls the docstring from that command to document what the command does. It lists the arguments and indicates their default value, or if they're a required argument, and all the other options that you can provide to that command. So this is free with Typer, essentially. And if we hadn't provided a default value to the hello command, and we try to run this without specifying a value, you get a nicely formatted error that says missing argument name. And of course, if we run the command with a value, it works as expected. And several of those examples you just saw use rich text output. And when we think about a command line interface as a user experience, there are better ways than simple plain text of conveying information. We don't want to replace information with things like color and bolding, but we can enhance the presentation of that information to make the experience better, and Rich is good at that. So here's one more example, and this also hints at our upgrade experience. So here we're indicating that an update to the CLI is available. We print the current version that's installed. We print the version that is available, the latest version available, and we print the command someone can run to get that new version. And Rich is handling sort of the panel around the text, the coloring of the text, and the bolding of the text in this case. And as we sat with this, we realized we have a substantial portion of the user base that probably also isn't that comfortable on the command line. These are people using the IDE every day. Maybe they use the terminal in their IDE, but maybe they use the graphic user interface for even their Git operations and things. I mean, it's very, very common, I think, today. And we didn't want to preclude them from this experience. So we looked for ways to provide a textual user interface. And There happens to be an application out there called Trogan that you can use to wrap an existing click or typer application, and it will build you a text user interface using the textual package. Textual is a package for creating text user interfaces. And so you get this kind of graphic-like experience, but in plain text. Here's an example. You don't need to necessarily read all the text if it's too small. This is from the SQLite utils package from Simon Willison. On the left-hand side, you have a menu of all the commands and subcommands that are available. And on the right-hand side, when you select a command, can look at all the arguments and options that it supplies. And as you type values into the input boxes for those, it will actually construct a command in real time at the bottom of the screen so that, again, you can learn how it's constructing commands, learn how you could construct a command. And once you've built a command that you want to run, you also have the option to run that right from this window. So again, it's a great way of meeting people where they are and bringing them along for the ride. And then we realized that if we weren't careful, we'd end up in the same problem that we started with, where we have a dumping ground of functionality and nobody knows what to use because it's just a field of text available to them. And we didn't want team A's domain conflicting with team B's domain. So a plugin-based architecture really kind of came to the forefront. And taking that a step further, some people might have scripts and commands on their local machine very specific to that individual that they might want to pull in as part of a cohesive experience so they can always go to one place to use it. These might be things they don't have time to convert to a CLI or a plugin command. They might be even third-party things that can't be directly integrated that they'd like to pull in. So, that looks something like this. We have a core CLI with functionality that's useful to everybody, plugins that can be installed to tackle a particular domain, and custom scripts that people have on their local machines. For the plugin part, we used a number of different things. The packaging package is great for parsing version strings, seeing what's installed and what is available to install. Import lib is good for dynamically importing code. You saw Ollie's harrowing lightning talk about that yesterday. And this also uses another thing defined in 621 called entry points, which is sort of a way of providing arbitrary metadata so that you can hook things together. And I looked heavily to PyTest's plugin system for this. PyTest has a great plugin system. And notably, when you install a PyTest plugin, it's immediately active, which is something that we really wanted in our experience as well. And so we've designed all of our plugins as installable packages as well. And we use pipx inject to bring those into the same virtual environment as our core CLI. Rather than using extras, extras kind of couple you to some a priori knowledge about what's available. We wanted plugins to be sort of infinitely extendable. So this is more of like a registry pattern so that people can install the core CLI and then way later on, see which plugins are available and add them. The custom scripts, on the other hand, are not anything particularly special. They work similarly to how Git handles custom scripts. So if you have an executable on your path that follows a particular naming convention, we can make the command available in the CLI using the name of that command. So quick recap, command line interface using typer, rich text using rich, text user interface using Trogan, installation and plugins using pipx, import lib, and packaging. And what we've ended up with is this tool, ITHAKA, which exposes a command line interface and a text user interface. There's no duplication of effort because one is generated from the other. They expose commands. Commands themselves are exposed either from the core CLI or from plugins or from custom scripts. And we've further modularized things by making commands focus on the user experience, and they get their data through integrations that talk with systems external to the CLI. And this is really kind of an important facet for contribution because the modularization helps defer kind of the cognitive load needed to understand this system whenever someone wants to add a new feature or change a feature. So bringing me to contribution, Another thing we focused on was making sure that we had tight feedback loops. You want to be able to make changes locally and see how they impact the end outcome. So pipx, the way it normally works, will install your package in a virtual environment, make the command available, but you can also pass a -- suffix flag, and it will create a separate virtual environment with a separate command that has that suffix on the end. So in our case, mainly people use ITHAKA as a command, but we would be able to run ITHAKA dev, and when paired with editable installs for pip, essentially gets you that feedback loop of being able to change code, run the command line interface, and see how things go. And for people working on plugins, we've also provided an exemplar plugin, and we've used this term exemplar to mean like it's kind of a template for what you could use to make your own plugin, but it itself is also a working plugin. So this kind of lets people, in addition to the documentation, kind of feel out in real time what these moving parts are. And despite a whole technical side of things, there's a huge socio-technical side of contribution as well. You heard Jay talk a lot about community building this morning. One thing we found was that helping power users solve their problems is a really big piece of getting people coming along. Again, designing intentionally so that adding and changing features is easy, and codifying common patterns in the code base. This is not like a don't repeat yourself type of sentiment, but more like if you're going to be doing this all the time, make it super easy to do. And then all of your typical guardrails that you'd want in a healthy project around test coverage, documentation, formatting and linting, and so on. And we needed a way to know if this was getting used and to know if we should continue investing in this. So early on, we hooked this into our business event logging system, and we can understand things like how many monthly active users we have. March was our biggest month, which was cool. You can also see every command that's run and how often. And so this tree map starts to give us a sense of like, what are the biggest areas of the CLI that are being used? Where should we invest in making sure the experience is great? It's no surprise to me that some of the biggest boxes here are people's kind of daily drivers, things they run once in the morning and let run all day, or things that they run several times a day, all the way down to the smallest things that are those domain-specific plugins or things that might only be useful in a debugging context or something like that are used more rarely. And we can see which versions are installed and kind of get a sense of adoption over time. And we get real-time metrics. So one thing that surprised me along the way is that looking at this in a visual way, I was able to see clusters of commands being run in quick succession. And I could look at those and understand if a command was something I expected to be run in quick succession. And when it wasn't, I could kind of ask, like, is this person struggling with something? Are they running this command several times because it isn't working in some way? And I've actually reached out to people and said, hey, it looks like maybe you had some trouble with that. Is there anything I can help you with? And I feel a little big brother about it in some ways, but they're also like, whoa, it's cool that you were able to see that. And yeah, I am having trouble, and here's what I was seeing. Or in this case, it's all good now, I figured it out. And this idea of supporting people and making it such that they feel good even when something's going wrong is a huge part of getting to advocacy. When someone says, hey, I've been in this space, I've been in this community for a little while, and it's really cool, it's really nice, people are helpful, you should come along. Like, that's how you really get people on board. And other ways to make sure that happens is to make sure there's a space where people can ask questions, share feedback, share shout outs for successes they've had, and a way for you to push out announcements to people. And then another big tool is like find someone in your organization who's doing a project that they're about to announce something about and campaign about. And if you can solve something in their space, you can also say like, hey, maybe we can announce some of our stuff together. And those will create visibility for you over time. And then just knocking out that great developer experience, both on the technical and importantly, the socio-technical side. So if this sounds interesting to you, I've made a minimal working version of this plugin-based architecture for command line interfaces available for you to look at and try out. And I hope you'll come talk to me about it and tell me everything that's wrong with it. But I hope it's helpful to you. I don't think I have time for a demo, but I will happily demo it to anyone who wants to come talk about it. Final remark, I wrote these 2 books. I hope to get a discount code for you all that I can share in Discord at some point. Don't have one now, but thank you.